And I looked back at my staff and I said, we not good, y'all. This is some of the sorriest minutes of basketball I've ever seen in my life. But don't worry about it, James. I already know what the media gonna say. The media gonna say Doc Rivers is a bad coach. They're gonna say Doc Rivers was running the wrong plays. And I'm not too worried about what the media gonna say, because I wanna know what you gonna say, James. You got the flow, James. Do something on it. Because you didn't do nothing on it out there. James, you shot 2 shots in the second half and hit none. Did you give up? James, did you give up? Just let me know. I need to know. I think I'm going crazy. Did you give up out there? Because every time I get a superstars on the team, they act like they can't play basketball no more, and it's killing me. So I'm giving it to you. Tell me something, because I need to know. James, take your ass back to the Rockets. I'm not playing with you. I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it. Tell him I quit anyway. Even if I'm fine, tell him I quit. James.
The worst team in the APAC region, the Shanghai Dragons, have just lost to a mid-tier contenders team in a 3-2 series and are likely going to get knocked out by yet another contenders team, O2 Blast, in the losers brackets. As with any Overwatch League team video that I make, I'll do a brief rundown of their history, and then in this case, I'll analyse Shanghai's most recent game against middling contenders team SPG. Shanghai's history as an organisation is probably the most interesting out of any team in the league. Of course, there's the infamous 0-40 season in 2018, which broke records not just for esports, but for sports in general. However, as we all know, they made a solid comeback in 2019, ending their loss streak in their third game against the Boston Uprising. They still finished in a mediocre 11th place in the regular season, likely due to the GOATS meta, but this time around, they were actually fairly competent. And things only get better for the Dragons from here on out. In 2020, they finished first in the regular season and top 3 in the playoffs, losing against Seoul Dynasty in a tight 3-2 series. Still, they made 450 grand, which, isn't anything to scoff at. Things only get better for Shanghai as next year, not only do they become Overwatch League champions in a clear 4-0 series, thanks to pickups like Fate at the end of 2020, but they also finish first in every tournament available, apart from one against the Dallas Fuel, almost to making $2 million that year. Unfortunately, the Dragons do take a bit of a dip in 2022, but nothing too serious. They still held onto most of their roster in the 2022 season, finishing 5th in the regular season, and their poor playoff performance can just be chalked up to a bad meta that didn't really fit the team. However, here's where things get really rough for the Dragons. What I assume is due to budgetary constraints in 2023, the Dragons cut off most of their roster that brought them so much success. Losing Fate, Void, and most importantly, Lip, is what really put a massive dent in this team so much. And then, of course, Flutter gets re-signed but onto the tank role, and while Shanghai do acquire very solid DPS talents in Hisu and Viper, it's really the supports and tanks that drag the Dragons down so much. I mean, we're seeing it with the Shock too, with Max and Vindame just not living up to the hype. And so far, the Dragons as a team have looked pretty unimpressive to put it lightly. They've won only a single match, which was against the Seoul Dynasty where, let's be real, the Dragons DPS just put that entire series on their back. Aside from that, they've lost to every other Overwatch League team in the APAC region, and none of them were close games at all. And now, in the mid-season Madness qualifiers, the Dragons look even worse. With the introduction of a handful of Eastern Contenders teams, Dragons were the only Overwatch League team to lose to a Contenders team last week, and they weren't even O2 Blast. Now, I'll take a look at the map Shanghai lost against SPG and see what happens. First off, let's start with Lijiang Night Markets. Here, we're in the Ramatra mirror, so a few key things to keep in mind. Firstly, it's all about cycles. In other words, either team will be looking to go aggressive off their Nemesis form and their Maywall cycles, looking to force out the enemy cooldowns and get an early HP advantage. The key thing though, is that if you don't get a good wall, for whatever reason, you need to back up and play passive because you know the enemy team still have their cooldowns. And this is the first mistake Shanghai, or more specifically Viper, makes. Viper doesn't get a good wall off, so that's an obvious mistake. But he needs to realise this and S-key the fuck out of there so SPG don't get value off their cooldown cycle and their May wall. Instead, he plays way too aggressively, allowing SPG to get value off their cooldowns, leading to Viper dying. Surprisingly, I assume Flutter realised that he needed to play passive after Viper got a terrible wall because he didn't pop his Nemesis. If Viper had just backed off and Shanghai rotated to points, this neutral fight could easily be won by them. Next fight, Shanghai get a much better cycle. They nicely stack their wall, Vortex and Nemesis form, forcing out 2U shield, Nemesis form and Sojourns to stop the shots. The cooldown and HP trade probably slightly lean into Shanghai's favour, but unfortunately, Gangnam Jin just eats a railgun or a Mei headshots and Shanghai just lose that fight, so kinda unlucky. Next map, on the neutral, Shanghai look fairly good. SBG pop Vortex, Shield, Nemesis form and Ice Wall, but SBG haven't got the positioning to capitalise off their wall. So, Fleta smartly holds onto his cooldowns and pops them seconds when SBG don't get value off their cycle. However, unfortunately, once again, Iris just eats some Mei headshots, which forces Lamp, and Shanghai lose the fight because of that. It's kinda sad considering their macro actually looks solid here, especially considering that Hisu is on the angle with Fleta too. And again, next fight, although just pulls off some miracles with his icicles, which cause Shanghai to lose yet another fight. Yeah, not really much to say about the macro here. And then again, although catches not only Gangnam Jin, but also Viper. Look, this is just sloppy from Shanghai in terms of resetting, but considering there's been multiple fights lost just because of picks, is both good and bad for Shanghai. Good in that at least their micro is solid, and it's easy to just fix on these things, but it's also bad in that you can't really be wasting fights like these. Last fight is where things get messy with 9 ultimates. In short, Viper gets a good wall to cut off the split hold that SPG have, but Fleta is just too late with his shield and dies to Bap's Matrix. Also, Gangnam Jin is off the goop, trying to fight a Mei with Blizzard. I honestly could not tell you what he's cooking. So now on to Shambali. The composition matchup is pretty simple. In short, SPG play for frontline, while Shanghai play for angles. If SPG get a good commanding shout and good Mei wall on the frontline, it's Jova for Shanghai. If they don't, however, Shanghai will get more value, with Hisu taking angles with Dynamite, and Viper and Gangnam Jin flanking behind on the Tracer Kiriko. And that's basically what we see second fights. The Mei wall happens off screen, I assume, and SPG don't get much value from their cycle. So, as a result, the Shanghai DPS start taking angles and pound SPG. Next fight is somewhat unfortunate from Shanghai. Iris uses window to get space and push carts, fine, whatever. Viper, however, also uses Pulse Bomb and whiffs, which he really can't do because of the ultimates SPG have on boards. However, a more damning mistake is seen by Viper's eagerness. He, for some reason, blinks out into the open and gets headshot by Although. Why he just doesn't play cover is a mystery to me, and why he even peeks in the first place before Fleta even peeks out the corner is also a mystery, but to each their own. And then next fight, before there's even a fight, Hisu dies to aid Tanzo. Maybe some sloppy cover usage or bad rotation, but it seems like a common theme for Shanghai to be getting picked off like this at the start of each fight so early. And then last fight, just by looking at the ultimates, SPG should win this with a good war cycle, and they do. Ultimates like Blizzard, Rally and Rampage just enhance and extend the power spike of the wall shout cycle, and the only way Shanghai can maybe win this is to disrupt the SPG's rush with a good bob, but unfortunately, Hisu bobs too late. He likely should have tossed the bob as soon as the center pillar of Mei's wall was broken to disrupt SPG, or he needs to flank earlier with Gangnam Jin and get a bob on the backline. Now on to Oasis. I'll go through the final map, since that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. The key thing for either team in this matchup is to get value off their cycles. For Shanghai, it'll be Fleta's Bubble, and for SPG, it'll be Queen Shouts. The Somber Tracer and one of the supports will be helping fight the flank wars. First fight, Viper just goes down early yet again to what I can only assume is bad micro and cover usage on his part. The following fight, Fleta gets knifed back into SPG and dies, so more percentage goes to SPG. Then in the next fight, Shanghai actually have a good setup. They force an early shot from SPG, but unfortunately, Hisu doesn't translocate out, and Gangnam Jin seems to pop his Suzu too late. If Shanghai survive that shout cycle, then they can easily push in with Nano and roll over SPG. In the last fight, things go really hairy for Shanghai. SPG waste their EMP and their shout because they try and punish Tracer and Kiriko on the flank, but both Tracer and Kiriko have mobility, so they can just leave, and they do exactly that. This gives Shanghai a perfect opportunity to engage onto SPG with an EMP and or Nano Boost, but something really unfortunate happens. Iris gets hacked out of his Nano during the cast time, meaning his Nano Boost doesn't reach anyone. And then Gangnam Jin drops Kitsune Rush, but he should be teleporting back to peel for Iris, and then rush afterwards. There seems to be a massive disconnect between Iris and Gangnam Jin, alongside the supports and the tank too. So overall, Shanghai did not look pretty in that SPG match. They had some solid moments of macro, with the brawl comp especially, and Fletter has a decent Ramatra. But in that game specifically, Viper died way too often and way too early, Hisu had some dodgy moments, and the backline of Shanghai don't seem to be on the same page as Fletter and Winston. I assume and I hope that this was just an off game for Viper, because he's played a lot better before, but I'm not shocked to see that Shanghai's backline are disconnected. Keep your eyes out for that O2 Blast game, because that's definitely going to be interesting for sure. Anyways, that's it for the video. Shout out to my tier 1 and tier 2 Patreons, and let me know your thoughts down below. Until next time.